Welcome to this channel IBM classes. In this video session, we'll cover the basic introduction of Subfile for RPG programmers. So I do created this PPT for the same. So let's go through this PPT. So first thing is, what is Subfile? Sub Subfile is basically used to display data in tabular form on the device or on your screen. So we can display multiple records having of same type. Suppose for example we have file having two fields like id and name. So I want to display that id and name on my screen having the repetitive data of ids and name. So I'll be displaying those repetitive data into my screen. So in that case we'll be creating a subfile, so displaying multiple records having same type. So we have id and name of same types with multiple records. Sure. So this is the basic example where we can create a subfile, and this is basically used in display file programming in RPG. So subfiles actually reduce the programming to handle the repetitive data. So in case if we want to create a, you can say, a display file, we cannot achieve that very easily. So using this method, we cannot achieve that using those things. So we just create some files for that. So having repetitive data anywhere you have, so you must create a subfile for that. So subfile is basically used to show your data in a tabular form. We can display multiple records on the screen, or we can display the repetitive data having same type or same record layout, you can say. So this is subfile. Now next thing is, what is the use of subfile? Sure. So first thing is this one. With less lines of code, we can handle the repetitive data or the data of same type having multiple records to display on the screen. So this is the thing which we can achieve using the subfile with minimum lines of code. Second thing is, like, we can display the records of same record layout, or you can say same type on the screen. That I have given you an example for the same, like id and name from a file and having multiple rows in the file. So we can display those in our subfile. Now another use of this subfile are that we can first thing is, we can display our data on subfile. That is an inquiry screen, you can say. Now we can display with selection, means that we can display those records and we can select something from that, means we can take input from that. Now display with change means we can display the records on the subfile or on the screen, and we can change some values through this, through input to the subfile, and we can do operations. Now again, the input only, with or without validations. We can use the subfiles for data entry as well, so where we can apply the validations or not. It depends on us that whether we are applying the validations on inputting data or not. So we can use subfiles for data entry and the combination of above as well. So we can display the data, we can change the data, or we can select the data, or we can input the data, validate those data. So these things can be performed in a combination as well. So subfile, this is the basic use of subfile that I have mentioned right now. Now come to the next page. Subfile basic introduction starts here. So the important thing we should know, that the subfile is executes in two ways, two steps. So it's a two-step process. first thing is you're loading the data into the sub file and then displaying that on the screen. So what you are doing, like here we can see that you are reading the database file or files. Maybe there is only one file from where you are reading the data, or maybe there are number of files, n number of files. So you are reading the data from the database file in your RPG program, then extracting those data in your work variables, or you are directly loading that data into the sub file. So it means that you are reading the database file, you are extracting the data from the database file, then loading that data in the sub file, and then displaying sub file data on your device. Sure, on your screen. So this is the flow of a sub file process. So this is a two-step process. First thing is load, and second thing is display. So load is basically going to reading the database file, extracting the data, and then loading that data into the sub file. That is a load process, which we will be covering in our next slide in detail. So we can see that database file or files, and then we have a sub file format. Sure, we have two formats actually, subfile format and subfile control formats in the subfile. Now, subfile format is consist of subfile records, means flow data, individual records. So there may be n number of records, so there will be n number of subfile records they were called. So one record called as subfile record, n number of record called subfile records. Sure. There was another format, subfile control format, and then display device. So this is the flow in detail. So where you are reading the database file, extracting the data, writing those data into the subfile, means subfile format, and then displaying those data. Now we can see that subfile consists of two record formats. First one is subfile format, that is SFL, and second one is subfile control format, SFLCTL. We'll be discussing in further slides on the detail of these two record formats, which are mandatory for any subfile. Now we can see that SFL. Now we'll be discussing about SFL subfile format. So what is actually a PFS? So we are writing the data into the PF, and we are then reading that data from the PF. Sure, from a file, disk file. Now, subfile format is what we are reading the data from the disk file, from the PF or the database file, what we are calling that a database file, and then loading it into the subfile. That is subfile format, SFL record format. Sure. So that gets loaded into the main memory of your job, or you can say the memory of your job. So this is a file which is actually present in the memory. Sure. And that can be fastly accessed by the programs or programs instead of accessing those disks. Sure. Second thing is write records to SFL for display, subfile records. So when we want to display those number of records, or the records which we want to display on the sub file or on the screen, we need to write those records to the sub file format, or you can say that SFL. So SFL, sure. So SFL defines the structure of the subfile. So whatever the fields or the columns you are going to display on the subfile, or the multiple records, or you can say that subfile records you are going to display for those columns, are gonna be defined in the SFL record format. So for example, I have ID and name in the file. So ID and name will be the record structure of your subfile as well. I am going to display that into the subfile. So SFL actually handles the individual subfile records, means the individual data that has been read from the database file and gets loaded to the subfile, means subfile format. So it handles the individual subfile records. Sure. So basically I have written the same thing, add the records to the subfile. So subfile format is basically used to add the records to the subfile, and what we are doing with this, that we are writing the records to the subfile and reading the subfile records individually from the SFL. Sure. So these are the basic things which one should know before writing the actual code for a subfile. So before going into the coding, I'm just clearing the or making the understanding or developing the understanding of what actually subfile is, why we are using that subfile, where we are using those subfiles, and what is the basic information that we should know about the subfile, and what are the record formats or the formats which are used in subfile, and what they are do, what their meaning is, and why we are using those formats. Sure. Now let's come to the next slide, subfile control format. So we discussed about SFL, that is used to write the data to the subfile from the database file in your program. Now SFL control format is basically, you can say that, basically managing your subfile records. So it decides the number of records to display on a screen at once. So it basically decides how many number of records to be displayed on a screen at one time. So for that I'll be telling you right now, SFL page keyword is used, where we are providing that numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, anything, any number, depends on your size of the screen, not going uh, greater than that, not mentioning greater than that. Or so subfile control format basically decides how many number of records you are going to display at a screen. Suppose wrote you have written like 100 records to your subfile, sure, using SFL keyword. Now you want to display 10 at a time, so you will be giving the 10 number in the SFL page keyword, which is defined under subfile control, SFL control format. Sure. So we are defining number of records to load at once in a subfile. Sure. Number of records to display on a screen at once. All these things mean subfile size, or we can display or clear the subfile from using SFL as well. For this SFL clear sub keyword was it will be used for display. SFL things used defines the subfile as a whole entity. So means that it is controlling the SFL. SFLCTL is controlling the SFL basically. So whatever you have loaded to the subfile, that is SFL. Whatever the number of records, or you can say that subfile records are loaded to the subfile, it will be controlled by your SFLCTL. So it decides, SFLCTL decides that, suppose you have loaded 100 number of records, so how many number of records will be displayed from those 100 records, or how many records to be loaded in your subfile is also decided by SFLCTL. That is, you want to load 200 records, then you need to give SFL size at 200. So these things, SFL is basically controlled by SFLCTL. So we can display the subfile, we can clear the subfile using SFLCTL, or you can say we can give the number of records to be loaded at one time, or the number of records to be displayed on a screen at one time. One more thing about this is, which is very interesting, like it allows us to display the heading information as well. Whatever the heading information we are giving as suppose we are giving ID, identity call, ID column, or name column, headings. So whatever the headings we are giving on the subfile are also displayed using this SFLCTL keyword. So we are going to include those heading inside this, and we can display those heading information as well. So I'll be correcting this. I think then spelling is incorrect. Information uh, wrongly mentioned that. Now come to the next slide. Subfile control. So subfile control is still going on. So SFLCTL subfile record format, and it has two keyword control header information. For control header information, that I've already told you that we can provide the heading information inside SFLCTL. So for controlling that, we are using SFL or SFL subfile display or subfile display control. So SFL display controls subfile record display basically. So if you have seen that um, many number of times you are going to load the empty subfile. Sure. So in that case, you are getting an error that you are trying to load a empty subfile. So in that case, this keyword plays important role. SFL display. So in case if your subfile has no records to be loaded or displayed, no records has been loaded on the subfile and there is no record which is there to be displayed, then in that case you don't need to activate that. You must not activate that SFL display keyword. Sure. And SFL display control keyword is basically used for the header fields on the display control format, or if you want to take some input from uh, user, some input from the user and output it to the sub file. In that case, you are using SFL display control. So I'll be telling you right now that this is a, you can say, optional keyword. So whenever you want to take input back from the user to the sub file, in that case you are going to use SFL display control keyword. Else you don't need to use this. You should use SFL display because that controls the display of subfile records, so which is also handling the empty. You are not going to activate that keyword in case of empty subfile. Sure. Let's come down. Now I'm talking about the processes or the steps that are actually followed in a subfile process. So first thing is loading subfile and displaying the subfile. So loading subfile is read one or more database file that I have already told you, and extract information and write extracted information in the form of subfile records to the subfile format, SFL record format. So these things I have already covered while explaining the subfile. So let's come down. Displaying subfile. So for displaying the subfile, we are using execute format. Execute format function operation is just writing the data into the subfile or the device and then reading that, displaying that by reading that. So this execute format is just to display the records on the device. Subfile. So what we are going to do is we are executing subfile control form by displaying the subfile. Sure. We can display the the most important thing is that we can display the subfile in full screen mode or in a window mode. So window mode is just we will be creating a window inside full screen and then writing or displaying that subfile into that window. So that is going to call as windowed subfile. So on detail we'll be covering this in our next videos. We'll be creating the examples, coding examples for the same, and I'm ensuring you that that will be very easy so that one should or one must understand that how we'll be going to writing these subfiles, because these are very easy, which requires less number of code, less line of code to be coded for writing a subfile. And after watching those videos provided by IBM in the future for the subfile will be easy for you in future. So let's come to the next slide. Now types of subfile. There are actually three types of subfile: load all subfile, expandable subfile, single page subfile. So let's come down. So first one is the load all subfile. Load all subfile basically means that when you are reading the database file and then you are loading the writing the subfile records to the SFL subfile format, means you are loading the records to the subfile. So you are loading all the record at one time. So when you are loading all the record at one time and then displaying that loaded record and then displaying the subfile, so this is called as load all subfile. So before displaying, you are loading all the records. So when user is doing page up and page down, so he will user will have all the data on his screen, but they are going to we already discussed about page up page SFL page and SFL size keyword. So SFL page keyword controls the number of records to be displayed at one time on the screen, and but I can say that those SFL size number of records, if they are present, would get loaded to the subfile and are present for page up and page down operation, or you can say that roll, roll up, roll down and roll up. Sure. So in that case, you don't need to do any handling for page up and page down function. In this case, function it's system itself take care of these things, and even you don't need to mention these things in your display file, DDS, you can say. So there is a note for this: all the records for display must be loaded before displaying the subfile. So this is load all subfile. So in this case, one must information is like SFL size must be greater than SFL page, or must be at least one greater than SFL page. So this is called as load all subfile. So what we are doing? Loading and displaying. So loading means writing all the subfile records in the subfile format, the subfile, and then displaying means writing the subfile control format, execute format, the subfile control format. Now expandable subfile. Expandable subfile means we are loading a specific number of records into subfile. This is just, you can say that SFL page and SFL size. Suppose I've given SFL page as 5 and SFL size is defined as 10. So we are loading a specific number of records into subfile. Suppose we have loaded 5 records, and again when we do page up, we are going to load again 5 records. So we have loaded the 10 records, which is now SFL size limit has been reached. Now in that case, suppose user didn't find those expected number of records, expected record that he wants to see, and in his subfile or in his screen, in that case he will again press this page page down, and our process is so intelligent to fetch another set of records that is fixed, means 5 records, another set of 5 records, and expanding the subfile means expanding the subfile or loading the more number of records that is fixed into the subfile. In that case, uh, the file gets expanded by the fixed number of records each time user press the page down. So in this case, we need to do the page down handling in our program. So you can see that load a specific number of record into subfile, display the subfile. If expected record is not displayed on the screen, then on page down the program has to load more records fixed into this and fixed number of records into subfile. Once loaded, then display next page. Continue this until expected record is displayed or no more records to load in subfile. Page down handling is required in this case. So I think here also I need to correct this spelling because it's come down. So there is a little bit difference between the load all and expandable subfile, which is actually in case of, suppose In case of expandable subfile, it will expand itself beyond the boundaries of that SFL size, but less than 9999, because 9999 is the maximum size for load all and expandable subfiles. And so to overcome these drawbacks, we have another subfile type of subfile, that is single page subfile, in which there is no need of mentioning any number of, means there is no limit to display the number of records. Whatever the number of records in your file, you can display those records in your subfile using single page subfile. So load those number of records that can be displayed at once on the screen. Sure. Suppose in this case, what is happened that SFL page and SFL size is same. Means suppose your SFL page is 10, so SFL size was, then SFL size is also 10. Sure. So whatever the number of records you are loading into the subfile, you are displaying those, only those into the single page using single page subfile on the screen. So again, if you are loading next 10 records, so first thing you are doing that you are clearing those existing loaded records into the subfile, and then loading the another set of subfile records in the subfile. So this is actually you cannot do in the expandable subfile. You need to add more records to the subfile, and previous records are still exist in subfile. So you need to do page up handling, uh, one time page up handling as well for that, I think. So in this case, you need to do page up and page down handling both, because you are clearing the subfile loaded records, previous loaded records, and loading the next records. So this is you are doing again and again. So if you want to do page up and page down, then you need to write the logic to for the page up and page down. That I will discuss in our coding videos whenever we are going to create a single page of file. Sure. Now comes to subfile keyword. So I've already told you that the difference between these subfile load all, expandable, and single page subfile. Now come to the subfile keywords which are used with the subfile. So these are the mandatory keywords. SFL subfile format. So subfile format is used for that writing data subfile equals to subfile. Subfile control is controlling the SFL. So here we are using SFL DSP, subfile display, SFL DSP CTL. So this is optional. I already told you that this is optional. This will be used in case if you want to take input um, on the records, subfile records you displayed on your screen. In that case, you are only going to use it. So SFL page, subfile page, subfile size. So these are the mandatory keywords. Other optional keywords are there, which are used with SFL control, subfile control format. So they are SFL clear, subfile delete, subfile drop, SFL end, subfile fold, subfile initialize, subfile message. So these keywords used with message subfile, subfile message identifier, subfile program message queue, subfile record number, subfile records not active, subfile enter, subfile raw value. So these all are optional keywords which are optionally used with the subfile. So I'll be discussing these things once I'm creating the videos, coding videos for uh, the subfile. So I'm using those keywords as well there, so that you should get the clear understanding of each keyword, where we'll be going to use these keywords, and why we will going to use these keywords at that point. So this will be covered later in our later videos, in our later coding videos. So let's come down. Now at last, this is the subfile general information which one should know, that one file can contain more than one subfile. So we can um, write more than one subfile in our display file. So this is true. We can 12 subfiles can be active concurrently. So this is also the thing, that at one time 12 subfiles can be active. two subfiles can be displayed at the same time. At the same time, you can display two subfiles. In load all and expandable subfile, the subfile size must be at least one greater than the subfile page. So this thing I already told you. In single page subfile, the subfile size equals to subfile page. Already told. In the load all and expandable subfile, maximum number of records that can be loaded in subfile are 9999. So already told. So these general informations, I think the starting three informations I didn't give you at the starting of the video, but the next three I already gave you. So these are extra information which one should know, that what are the facts, or you can say that what are the basic facts regarding the subfile which are there. So thanks. So this was the last slide. So this is all basic information that I have covered in this video regarding this subfile. So I think this video will clear the doubts, or will going to build some understanding on the subfile concepts, subfile keywords, subfile formats, and all those things, subfile types, so that you should start doing coding on that. So before coding, I thought that this video will be helpful for every one of us, so that we should know that why we are using something or some keyword or some type of subfile at any instance, or for any situation. So why we are doing anything, so we should know, I think. So um, thank you and have a nice time for watching my video. Please don't forget to subscribe our channel for getting the latest uh, updates on, or the notifications from our channel. Thank you and have a nice time.